announcement. It is so. Please, can you open your cameras and we need your real names. And can you please put your real names on the Zoom program? Thank you very much again. And now we can start with the first presentation of the next section. Our first speaker is Professor Dr. Khan. He is from University of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Lahore, Pakistan. And his presentation is about the implementation of Word.
So, can you see my screen? Can you listen to me?
We can see. Yes, we can see.
And you can see my screen as well.
Yes. Now on the screen we can see the title of your presentations. Now it is the second page, I think.
Okay, you can see the title of my presentation on the screen now?
Now we can see.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much to give me the chance to speak on this very important event. The topic of my presentation is implementation of OIE recommendations on competencies of graduating veterinarians require collaborative efforts among countries. Simply, it means that when the students completes his graduation, what competencies that should be in the mind of the students that will help to integrate with the veterinary science knowledge at national and international level. So every graduate must have these competencies to compete at national level and international level. So my name is Professor Dr. Itsham Khan. I done my PhD in veterinary public health from Freie University Berlin. And right now I am doing my job as a chairman, Department of Clinical Sciences, University of Veterinary and Animal Sciences, Subcampus Chang, Pakistan. First of all, in terms of epidemiology, at day one, the veterinary graduate must know the knowledge of epidemiology in terms of descriptive epidemiology, in terms of disease control applications of epidemiology and outbreak investigation. In descriptive epidemiology, he must know the who, when, and where. Who means which species is involved, when means the when there is any disease outbreak, he must deal with all these three tools. And he must have the knowledge of the descriptive epidemiology, that is also called observational epidemiology, and he must know the knowledge of the descriptive epidemiology. Without descriptive epidemiology, it is very, very difficult to control the disease at national and international level. So at day one, graduates must have the knowledge of the epidemiological tools, descriptive epidemiology, analytical epidemiology, computational epidemiology. He must have the know and how to move. And secondly, the transboundary animal diseases. The veterinary graduates must know the knowledge of the transboundary animal disease. In transboundary animal disease, the first important thing is disease recognition. Disease recognition means the transmission of the transboundary animals, and he must know the which diseases are reportable in his or her country. Which diseases are reportable means notifiable diseases by the OIE. Very, very important thing in this regard, the notifiable disease of one country may not be notifiable disease in other country. So he must have the knowledge of the notifiable disease in his country and also the neighboring countries. So by knowing the knowledge of the notifiable disease according to the OIE, World Animal Health Organization, so this knowledge is also very important. And secondly, the global distribution of the transboundary animal disease, that is also very important. The day one graduate must know the national and international level, the surveillance program, what kind of surveillance program are going on in his country and the neighboring country to control any transboundary disease at the global level. And the third one is the diagnostic and therapeutic tools for the prevention and the control. The day one graduate must know the diagnostic test, for which disease, which diagnostics test is most suitable. But I would stress most recommended, because he must have the knowledge that OIE recommends this test against that transboundary animal disease. He must know that. Without knowing the knowledge of the recommended test, he can't diagnose the disease, and he can't give the animal certification, and the animal can't move from one country to another country. And similarly, he must have the knowledge of implications of transboundary animal diseases. Implications means the day one graduate must know the trade ethics, the transportation of the animals from one country to the another country, keeping in view the transboundary animal diseases. And similarly, he must have the knowledge of cost of the procedures. All the procedural paradigms, he must have the knowledge of the cost. For example, transportation cost. And the public health implications are also very important. He must have the knowledge of the public health implication of the transboundary animal diseases. And similarly, regulatory framework. And he must have the knowledge of the regulatory framework, reportable diseases, regulatory framework of the national and international reportable disease system. So I am not going in the minor details. I am just giving you a preview of the OIE recommendation for day one graduates. Next is the zoonosis, including foodborne zoonosis. In foodborne zoonosis, he must have, the day one graduate must have the knowledge of the disease recognition, including foodborne diseases and zoonotic pathogens. Which kind of the zoonotic pathogens they are prevalent in foodborne zoonosis, and he must have the knowledge of the transmission route of the foodborne zoonotic agents, including the rabies, brucellosis, salmonella, E. coli, anthrax, TB, Rift Valley fever, teniasis, hydatidosis, and toxoplasmosis. And next is the diagnostic application. The day one graduate must know the diagnostic application. For example, CFT is the recommended test for any zoonotic disease, or the Western blot test is, because some tests are obsolete tests. They are no more recommended by the OIE. They have been replaced. They are no more in use. So he must have the fresh knowledge of the which diagnostic test is recommended for the trade and international trade of the animals and animal products. And similarly, the regulatory framework of the zoonotic and foodborne diseases. He must know the regulatory framework. He must know the regulatory framework of the zoonotic and foodborne diseases. And next is the emerging and re-emerging diseases. The day one graduate, veterinary graduate, must know the knowledge of emerging and re-emerging disease in his region. And in, for example, if I talk about myself, then in Pakistan, in Southeast Asia, and then in Europe, and then in the world, he must have the knowledge of emerging and re-emerging diseases. And he must have the knowledge of the definitions of the definition of emerging diseases and re-emerging diseases. And he must know the contaminant levels. He must know the containment levels. Along with definition of emerging and re-emerging diseases, he must know the knowledge of the biocontainment of any emerging and re-emerging levels, biocontainment level 1, 2, 3, 4. And similarly, the risk factors involved along with these emerging and re-emerging diseases. And he must have the knowledge of the risk factors of emerging and re-emerging diseases. Risk factors mostly linked with host, risk factors mostly linked with agent, and risk factors mostly linked with environment. The day one graduate must know this epidemiological triad linked with the risk factors. And thirdly, using appropriate information sources. He must know the which sources are most reliable regarding these, to retrieve the knowledge of the emerging and re-emerging diseases at the internet level, at the database level. For example, WAHIB World Animal Health Information Database System is the most reliable source in this regard. Next is the disease prevention and the control. Regarding disease prevention and control, the day one graduate must know the establishment of prevention and control programs of contagious diseases. Establishment of the contagious disease. In this regard, he must know the knowledge of the small farmers at small holding animal farmers, how he can implement this establishment of control program, at urban level how he can establish this control program, and at pastoral level how he can establish this program. National programs, and then next is the national programs, and in at national level he must know the which kind of the test and slaughter policy that is going on in his country, and he must know the which kind of the test and culling policy that is going on in. It is quite possible that test and slaughter policy is no more applicable in his country or the neighboring country. So he must differentiate between these two, and he must connect these to control the infectious and emerging and re-emerging disease in his region. And similarly, implication of the contingency of plans. In this regard, he must know the animal identification, because many infectious disease, there are many implications. For example, animal identification is one of the implications. And similarly, to control any contagious disease, another implication is traceability. It is very difficult to trace the contagious animals and its origin. And similarly, he must know the emergency vaccination program. That is another implication, and he must know about that. Next is the food hygiene. In food hygiene, the day one veterinary graduate must have the knowledge of pre-harvest, harvest, and post-harvest. What are these, and what is the difference among these? Pre-harvest. Pre-harvest mean in term of food hygiene means the veterinary graduate must have the knowledge of the managemental practices and conditions to ensure safe and wholesome food. It means pre-harvest. So what you can do before the harvesting of the food means the managemental practices. And secondly, harvest. Harvest means what you can do to ensure the safety of the food at the farms, including ante-mortem and post-mortem. That falls in harvesting of food. So ante-mortem and post-mortem, they are also, he must know all the pros and cons of the ante-mortem and post-mortem of various kind of infectious diseases in terms of food safety. And the third one is the post-harvest. In post-harvest, the most important, what you can do when the food is ready to use, and when the food and the animal products, they are ready to send to the end users. In, for example, HACCP, hazard analysis critical control point. When at the conveyor belt, your chicken products, they are moving on, so immediately you can identify any problem, you can get rid of that. That is hazard analysis critical control point. And similarly, the sanitary practices, that is also very important, that even at the time of packaging, the pathogens that can be transmitted from the machinery to the animal products, and they can disseminate to the end user. And similarly, the next is the integrating human and animal health food safety. It means that veterinarians and physicians both sit together and they integrate their knowledge to combat the infectious diseases which have negative impact on food chain, and they must ensure the food safety. Next is the veterinary products. The day one veterinary graduates must have the knowledge of the appropriate and rational use. Appropriate and rational use mean that he must have the knowledge of the veterinary products. For example, drugs, for example, vaccination, for example, the anti-serum. He must have the knowledge of these rational use of all these veterinary products in veterinary science. And next is the drug residues. Day one veterinary graduate must know the knowledge of the drug residues the residual time periods of the different drugs, and their withdrawal time period of the various drugs, implementings, and so on. And similarly, the antimicrobial resistance. Nowadays, this is very hot topic around the world, around the globe. Antimicrobial resistance is causing more and more problem day by day, and this is the most challenging task. And the veterinary graduates must know the knowledge of the antimicrobial resistance. And it is worth mentioning here, as I told you before, that each country has its own list of the antimicrobial resistance. It is quite possible one pathogen which is showing antimicrobial resistance in one country, it is very horrific, but it is not so much lethal in other country. So this is very important. So the next is the animal welfare. This is also very important topic, and nowadays the world is snatching the attention of this topic, and it is very important for the day one veterinary graduates must have the knowledge of the animal welfare. And first of all, he must know the animal welfare definition and its application. It means he must know the knowledge of the owners, he must know the knowledge of the handlers, he must know the knowledge of the producers and the veterinarians. All they are linked with animal welfare. And secondly, the standards and the regulations. The day one veterinary graduate must know the standards of the animal welfare. For example, he must know the gestation pen size. He must know which kind of the
Dear
pen.
Professor, sorry for interrupting. Can you please sum up your speech because we have exceeded the time. Thank you very much, and sorry for again for the interrupting.
Okay. I shall try to summarize it as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, and next is the veterinary graduate must know the legislation and ethics. He must know the knowledge of the all the legislation, all the laws which are relevant for the veterinary science, and similarly he must have the know the ethical issues relevant to veterinary science. And he must have the, because health certification, he must know the knowledge of the health certification, because he must know the signs symptoms of the animals, and because he will have to write these certificates, then the animal can move from one country to another country. And another thing, scientific and technical communication. He must have the knowledge of the scientific and technical communication skills. And next is he must have the knowledge of the veterinary services in his countries, which kind of the veterinary services they are going on at animal health level, animal managemental level, animal transportation level, at national and international levels, and which kind of the statutory bodies they are working in his country. And next is the health status of animal products, and he must have the knowledge of the animal health status and the product inspection, all the relevant knowledge of the health certifications. And he must have the knowledge of outbreak investigation and all the components of disease prevention and control. And in advanced food hygiene, he must have the knowledge of residue testing programs, animal product traceability, and food safety. And he must have the knowledge of the risk analysis, risk assessment, and risk management and risk communication. And he must have the knowledge of the research of the studies design, hypothesis development, data analysis, and then interpretation of these results. At the end, I would say he must have the knowledge of the all the OIE, WTO standards settings for the animal health and welfare. And he must have the knowledge of the international standards. Thank you very much. If you have any question, you are more than welcome.
Dear Professor,